but they're not really comparable to a full like handmade shoe. Legitimate reasons why folks have concerns about goods that are made in China. Hey guys, this is the 7th episode of the Cordovan podcast. My name's David. I have my Instagram account. I go by Shelvage. My YouTube channel, which you may be watching this podcast on, is also by the name of Shelvage. And this podcast is really meant as a way to interact with the community, to share the main things that I'm passionate about, which is traditional footwear, Goodyear welded, hand welded footwear, primarily made out of my favorite leather, which is shell Cordovan, as well as menswear, mainly casual menswear these days, especially with the working from home environment. But now that we're starting to kind of get back in the office, particularly myself, I'm a bit selfish in that manner. It's going to expand more maybe into some of the more formal elements of like the business world. Let's dive right into the topics. Normally what we do is we look at the industry news, look at the shoegazing blog, the shoe snob blog, as well as different recent videos that have been published on YouTube, any of the other forums like Facebook or Style Forum, any of those main meccas like on social media that conversations and topics are being discussed. We'll take a look at those, discuss any that are of interest. Then we'll get into the comments. So I'm going to reply to some of the comments that have been made over the last couple of weeks on my YouTube videos, possibly my Instagram account, but I think this week will just be YouTube. After that, I'm going to play and respond to any questions that you all have left on my pod inbox, which I'll link in the description as well as the show notes of the podcast. And then we'll wrap up with the weekly rant. This may be one of my favorite segments of the podcast, or just really of the week. It just kind of gives me the opportunity to all the things that I've seen or kind of thought about throughout the week, kind of bundle those up into some type of message that I want to share with all of you. Let's get started with the industry news. So for the industry news and really all the segments, I'm going to try and keep things as lean as possible. Instead of trying to find enough articles to talk about, I'm just going to talk about the ones that I think are the most meaningful, or at least that I have the most meaningful input to share with everyone. One of the topics that I came across recently is both from the shoegazing blog as well as a video from Sartorial Talks on YouTube, and it's about sneakers. Really dress sneakers, or kind of sneakers that are made using traditional shoemaking methods or with a traditional shoemaking vision behind the sneaker. So this is a roundup of sorts, or at least that's what he's calling it, is a quality shoe roundup of 2023. He goes through a lot of the most prevalent sneaker brands, or most prevalent traditional shoe brands that are making sneakers, and he walks through all of those different ones. I think he features a number of different brands. Goral, which is one that I've heard a little bit more about recently, as well as JC Lutz, Cheney. There are so the other one that he mentions is Skolix. And for those of you that know or are familiar with Jesper, he is part of the team at Skolix. He's really good about disclosing that stuff, but I figured for those that are kind of following along for the first time, or just newer to the community and may not realize that, figured I'd throw that disclosure in there for everyone. But I think the main purpose of him kind of focusing in on a segment of the community like this is the same reason I've been more interested in these casual, semi-dress casual sneakers, recently, is because they're just becoming more and more integral to the wardrobe, or to a shoe collector's, spectrum of what to consider as the world is just becoming more casual, working from home or not. A classic yet traditional inspired sneaker is definitely something that is becoming part of everyone's wardrobe. I do see one brand that's been kind of left out, or I don't know if it was left out, but just not included here. The other aspect here is this video from Hugo Jacome, if I pronounce that correctly, from Sartorial Talks. This video is specifically about a brand like Qualencourt. I know I butchered that, but you guys recognize the name here. So they are Both videos, they're pieces of content that are leaving out what I would consider to be probably the leader of this segment of the traditional shoe market, and that would be Crown Northampton. One of the big, whether it's selling points or one of the big talking points that Hugo and Alexis, who is the founder of this shoe brand, one of the big talking points that they focus in on is the fact that like they can resole these shoes, the sneakers that they're featuring in this Sartorials Talk video. That's something that you can obviously do with like the Crown Northampton shoes. And I think so I'll take a step back here. Without me knowing all of the intricate details of the shoes from this brand that Hugo is featuring, I would still have to kind of put my bet on Crown Northampton. I think the quality of the materials, as well as the quality of the different components used throughout the shoemaking process with them, as well as the techniques and the structure that's built into their sneaker, and then the quality of the leather uppers that they're using, really just with the entire aesthetic or silhouette of the sneaker that they're presenting, is definitely like my favorite. And I think it's the most broadly appealing sneaker that is in this like segment of the population. So I think I would definitely recommend to both Jesper as well as Hugo take a good look at Crown Northampton and consider diving into that brand to feature more broadly to your readership there. The other piece of news that I want to talk about, or at least maybe like share my thoughts on here, are a post that came up from PB Love of Shoes, which I believe is just like Paul Brungard. It's like a shoe care brand. I received like a shoe care kit from Artisan London of Paul Brungard shoe care products, and I'm not going to dive into that topic, but just giving you the context of who this is. So I'm pulling up an Instagram post, and I just wanted to share that for the folks that are just listening to this podcast. But in this post, they announced that there is a Swedish shoe shining championship coming up in September. I think it's September 30th. So definitely like dig into that. I think the link is in the comment here, and I'll put all that stuff in the description, the show notes. You know the deal by now. But I don't know. I guess like my thoughts are like you have the World Championship of Shoemaking, the World Championship of Shoe Shining, the World Championship of Patina. That took place in London this past March or April. And then that's from the Super Trunk Show. And then the Super Trunk Show is now going to New York, and they're having just the U.S. championships of like shoe shining, patina, shoemaking, etc. And now the Swedish shoe shining championships coming up. Obviously, every country, whoever wants to have a shoe shining contest is more than welcome to do that. I don't know. It feels like sometimes like the more they just, and this is, I guess I need to take a step back and clarify like my thought on this is that, this is coming out from this like shoe care brand, which is great. I guess my thought is like the more championships that are out there offered by like, whether it's the Super Trunk Show or just kind of like, dispersed amongst that same community, it kind of like waters down like the World Championships of Shoemaking. And I get that now that there's a Super Trunk Show in the States for the first time, they want to have that championship as well. It makes complete sense. Not really like faulting anyone, just kind of sharing my thoughts where like, at some point, like the World Championships is only the World Championships if it's the winners of all of these other competitions that are going on. Otherwise, if it's just another like horizontal competition, like what meaning or what additional value is there by winning that other than winning like the one in the States? It's really just kind of like your proximity to the championship, and then whoever's the best within that proximity is kind of like the caveat or the asterisk that kind of goes along there if this continues to, ripple the way that it is going. All right, let's get started with the comments. This first comment is from a video that I published last year, and it is around how to wear and find loafers that fit. Specifically, I was featuring my pair of remote bespoke tassel loafers from Ichigo Ichie. Speaking of Ichigo Ichie, If you haven't checked it out yet, I just published an unboxing and an initial review of this pair of Lazy Men, which is from the ready-to-wear collection of Ichigo Eche Shoemaker. If I can find another way to integrate Ichigo Eche into, the narrative that I'm sharing here on the podcast, I will definitely, because everybody knows, as much as I love the shoes, I love saying Ichigo Eche just as much. But anyway, in all seriousness, so the comment here, and for those listening, like the video that I published last year is really just kind of like featuring some of the main fit complications that people experience with loafers. So this comment from I think it's Guys Evening 4910 is, what about heel slippage on new loafers? Now, I can share like my reply here, but really my thoughts are I would kind of need to know more to give any type of like meaningful reply there. But just looking at this more broadly, heel slippage is going to be pretty like common on new loafers because you don't have the lacing to secure your foot in 100%. But usually, as long as it's like a minimal amount of heel slippage, like that will subside as you break in the insole and the outsole, because kind of what's causing the heel slippage is like the bottoming of the shoe is very stiff, so it doesn't flex as much as needed. So without that extra security of the lacing, your heel may come out a little bit. Once you break in the bottoming, so the insole and the outsole of the loafer, it'll be more susceptible to like molding to your foot and flexing with your foot, so that heel slippage like won't continue or persist throughout the life. Now, if you have an excessive amount of heel slippage, that's not due to the how stiff the sole is. It's just because it's the wrong size or just not a good fit for your foot. The next comment I want to focus here on is from the video that I published, within the last couple of months, I think, about how to find your correct shoe size. This is where I kind of like featured a kind of like how to and walkthrough of my thoughts with the Brannock device. And if you can see, I think I covered it up. Somewhere back there is still the Brannock device. For those that are watching, over my right shoulder behind the light, the Brannock device is hanging on my wall because that's really all that I think it's good for. At least for me, like I'm not measuring people's foot, and I don't need to measure my foot all the time. Kind of missed that return window on Amazon, I think. But seriously, so the comment here is, this gentleman said, and this is Ups Bear. I think I'm saying this stuff right, like Ups Bear, UPS Bear. Maybe it's UPS Bear. I finally went and put my feet on a Brannock device. It shows my feet to be a size 9.5, but funny thing is I've been wearing a size 8 shoes for the last 50 years. Or I can wear a size 8.5 with a thick trail sock. Having size 9.5 shoes on is like wearing canoes for me. So I don't understand. Oh, and I was wearing like thin dress socks to measure my feet. So this is obviously what like Ups Bear or UPS Bear is saying in his comment. My reply here, and I already replied and we kind of went back and forth, so I'll give you those replies and then, my broader thoughts. But so my initial reply is, you should have gotten at least like 3 sizes when they used the Brannock device. The length, the width, and the ball of your foot measurement. There are many intangibles though. Did you measure your own foot? And are you referring to like US sizing or UK sizing? Essentially, like if he got his US size and he was referring to a UK size shoe, like that size drop is kind of spot on. But, there's other things that could cause it. So he replied, actually, the ball of the foot was also a 9.5. And he's in Canada, so he's always worn size 8 US. And the Brannock device was in US sizing as well. And he also got the width of his foot, which was a B as in boy or C as in cat width. So my reply here is, well, that kind of explains it. When, using ready to wear or stock last to kind of find the right size, when the width of your foot is either like a full width or 2 full widths larger than the standard or narrower than the standard, typically the standard is a D width. The way that most consumers and the way that most like shoe salesmen compensate for that is by going down in the overall size. So if he's like 2 sizes narrower than a D, it would make sense that most likely what he's doing is intentionally or unintentionally is compensating for that narrow foot by sizing down from a 9.5 to an 8 or an 8.5, just like he said. That's pretty much like par for the course, because not every shoemaker makes size, a B width shoe or even a C width shoe. Most shoe salesmen also are going to start with a Brannock device, whether they read it correctly or not. And ultimately, like, what they're going to try and do is find the best shoe, or find the shoe that fits you best. So, again, they may unintentionally be pushing you in that direction because you're telling them that fits the best, and it all makes sense. There's nothing wrong here. No one's at fault. It's just kind of like, this is the generic approach that you have to take. The only alternative is kind of going into the made to measure, modified last, or like bespoke last world. Obviously, like, some shoemakers do offer B and C width shoes, but like, we're talking more broadly a generic approach solution. And I think this is a perfect one. And it kind of emulates like, hey, this does work, and it does work in the real world, even though, when we're kind of talking hypotheticals and kind of use different examples, we'll say like, ideally you don't want to do it that way, but in reality, like, that may be the only viable solution that's out there. And I think it makes sense, and it's a good thing to see it working. So there are 2 other comments that I have here that I want to reply to. One, I'm going to turn into the rant, so we'll save that for a bit. This comment is from JN9065, and this is on my video about Chinese handmade shoes last, a 6-month review of Blazing Wonders. Now, when I'm going to jump over to this video real quick and pull up the comment, because it's a lengthy one, so bear with me. His full comment here is, the top Acme Chinese made line shoe, I think it's called the Acme series, is vastly superior to any other Chinese made shoes out there, and very close, although not quite equal, to Bemmer's traditional collection, excuse me. He typed out the, Italian traditional. I'm just going to say traditional. Shoes like Fukuda, cleverly Spigola set the standards. Of course, these brands that I mentioned start at someplace around $1,700 USD, and Gassiano and Girling's Optimum starts at $6,000. It's expensive to make a well-crafted shoe. Let's be honest. Helen is good, and I'm sure honest, with great integrity, but China isn't exactly known for having the best trade, commercial, ethical standards and practices. If English and Spanish commercial goods turn out to be below advertised standards, I know exactly how to file a grievance against the company. But in China, you have no reliable recourse. I think you're being a little naive asking why one might question the advertised standards of a Chinese-made product. Personally, I'd rather save my pennies and purchase from one of the better-known companies, with the exception of the Acme series. The other Chinese companies appear to cut too many corners for me. So I replied to this, and obviously I'll put the link in the video. I encourage you to watch the video when you're done with the podcast, but you can also dig into the rest of the comment thread. If I boil my response down to be as brief as possible here, my thought is, like, I'm not faulting anyone, and I'm not saying that there aren't legitimate reasons why folks have concerns about goods that are made in China. The mass produced goods coming out of China, coming out of factories, there's concerns. There's reasons why people aren't always, the most excited to see something is made in China. I get it. I'm not claiming that to be false. What I'm saying is, like, there are the exceptions to the rule. And there are definitely more than just one good shoemaker that's located in China. Many of these shoemakers that are in China, and they are Chinese themselves, I believe, have training either outside of China, or they've been trained in the traditional shoemaking techniques from somebody, say in like Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, and maybe they got that training while they were still in their home country of China, and now they've put those crafts to use. It doesn't necessarily mean that every single individual or every single like small artisanal workshop has to kind of be punished or has to be painted with a broad brush that like the majority of goods are that come out of China. The other aspect of it is I'm not necessarily saying that you should ignore every other shoemaker and only support those from China. What I'm saying is that they're making, and the shoemakers that I'm talking about are, the few, but they're making quality handcrafted shoes, hand welded, hand lasted, the deal, at a fraction of the price for some of them. And they're making them more accessible than, a Goodyear welded shoe maybe coming out of Italy. So for somebody that's looking for all of the hallmarks of a bespoke shoe and they want premium leather, they want all of the not just the aesthetics of something being handmade, but they want the actual handmade goods. Shoemakers like Blazing Wonders or Helen Shoemaker, Jim John Yarn Shoemaker, etc. As I go down the line, they're able to offer you that at a much more digestible price point. So for those that are looking for being able to kind of like punch above their weight as far as like what they can afford, like this is a great option. And doesn't mean it's for everybody. It doesn't mean that it's for nobody either. So it's really what I'm trying to do is just, hey, nobody else is kind of giving the benefit to everyone, that's in the community of seeing some of the most responsible and respectable handmade shoes from China. So in a side-by-side comparison, kind of doing a roundup, talking about the advantages, the disadvantages, and giving all of that information to the consumers so that folks that have been looking at these shoemakers, but just like, hey, I don't really know if I should trust them. I don't know if it's as good as it looks in pictures. This will give them the information that they need to make an informed decision or an informed purchase as a consumer. It can be true that there are, concerning business practices out of factories in China and that small individual workshops making handcrafted shoes may not be part of what that broader concern is. And there's no reason to not consider them if it's what you're looking for. Shameless self-plug here. Definitely stay tuned. I'm working on the video. I promise. I know I keep not teasing about it, but saying I'm working on it. It's real this time. Should be ready this week. I actually filmed it just before this, so it's all said and done. Just need to work some of the editing magic so that you get to actually enjoy it. On to the final comment here. So this is kind of on par with that. We're talking again about Ichigo Shoemaker. This is actually a comment on that video that I mentioned earlier in the podcast. This comment is from M.M.X.4244. His comment is, how would you compare these to TLB's Artista line? So I'll give you the broad strokes of what I replied to, and then I'm going to expand a bit about just comparing shoes in general. TLB Artista, they're very nice shoes, but they're not really comparable to a full handmade shoe. TLB is a machine-made shoe with some hand finishing, and that's great. It doesn't make them any lesser. Rather, there's just a lot more value that you're getting when the price is equal, but one is a factory-made shoe and the other is a 100% handmade shoe. M.M.X.4244 replied, that's fair. Here's to hoping that they include some more minimalistic models in their ready-to-wear line. Good old regular round cap-toe Oxfords, black and brown would be nice. The models that he's seen so far are a bit too aggressive for his taste, and that's fair. What I would... The reason that I want to expand on this is because we part of the problem, get caught up too much in comparing apples and oranges. It's TLB and a handmade shoe. Neither are bad. You can't really go wrong with either. But if you're trying to compare them, there's so much nuance in it. And the only one that could compare it is from a standpoint of I want a particular shoe and I'm comparing these to figure out which fits that vision of what it is that I want. If you're just comparing it, side by side for the sake of comparing something, it's going to be a very hard comparison to rationalize. Let me start with this. So there are, the price brackets and price categories that we're all familiar with under 500, between 500 and 1,000, 1,000 to 2,000 or 1,000 to 1,500 and so on. Whenever you're kind of at the cusp of one of those price brackets, you can always make the decision of like, do I want the entry level of like the higher end bracket, or do I want the best shoe in that price bracket or in that price budget that I can afford? There are trade-offs of either one, meaning one's going to come from a factory, be a machine-made shoe, while the other one may be a handmade shoe. But that also means that some of the details on the machine-made shoe may be like more polished, more refined than that on the handmade shoe, because you're at the entry level of that next price point. That doesn't make the handmade shoe at the entry level worse than the Goodyear welded shoe at the top of the price bracket, but it does mean that there are going to be trade-offs. If you're paying the same price that somebody that it costs to make a factory made shoe, but you're paying that price for a handmade shoe, it means that they have to be able to offer it at that for a reason. There's probably less time going into the finishing, less time maybe going into the design, the architecture of like building that shoe. And those things are all fine. It really depends on like what is of value and what's most important for you with that one shoe purchase. If it's that you want something that's hand welded and that's really the number one priority, that's all that matters when trying to decide who to make this shoe purchase from, then like that answers your question. If it's that you just want the most elegant, most clean, just the you want something that's going to be like flawless, an entry level shoe is not going to do that. You're going to want to go with the highest end within the price, budget or bracket that you can afford, because that's going to give you the most, attention to detail, especially more attention to detail than an entry level shoe at another price bracket would give you. It's that like we can compare things. We can compare shoes. We can compare shoe makers. We can compare like denim, whatever it is you want to compare, we can do it. But just because somebody, whether, let's just take me for instance, just because I say like one is better than the other, that doesn't mean the other is any lesser than what it actually is. It just means that, the things that I put the most value on more closely aligns to what I chose. If two shoemakers make everything using the same techniques, the same materials, the same, facilities available to them, then you have a much more like even platform to compare them on. But in reality, like people are very passionate about their choice. Often they're going to say what's better is the thing that they've already decided to go with, or something that they have already invested in and are kind of like waiting for that product to arrive. And it's because they're validating what they've already spent their money on. Hopefully that like resonates with some of you. I know this is always like a tricky conversation because everyone always says like, how do you compare Acme and Mecariello? How do you compare Gation and Girling and Crockett and Jones? Just like all of these like abstract, very like segmented, products or producers of products. And it's just such a hard conversation to get into because no matter what, it feels like you can leave something out and you're just not being fair to the person that's answering the question. Let me know if you have any other questions, and I really do encourage you guys to check out the pod inbox link, share any questions, comments, tell me that like you hate everything, but you listen to it anyway. I don't know how constructive or instructive that would be for me, because if you listen to it anyway, like why do I need to change anything? I'm just kidding. Seriously, let me know what your thoughts are. You can record a voice message. You can just put in a text message, whatever it is. It'll get featured in the next video, the next podcast, excuse me. But yeah, I really appreciate it. If you guys made it this far, put a comment in there, come up with something unique yourself. And that's how I'll know that you made it this far into the video, and I can prioritize getting back to those comments over the others. If you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts, I really would appreciate if you guys did a review of the podcast. That would definitely like help lift the podcast visibility up a little bit, but I'd just like to hear what everybody thinks about it. For those of you that listened or watched on YouTube, I encourage you to get over to like Apple Podcasts and put a review in. Again, it'll make the podcast a little more visible. That doesn't hurt anyone. It may even benefit me a little bit, but that's the goal, I think, right? We want to try and grow the community that listens to the podcast so that we can all kind of interact and connect with more folks than we do right now that share our passion. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon. If you want to check out the rest of the podcast episodes, check out the link, not over here, but over here on my left shoulder. If you guys want to see the video from Ichigo Ichi-e, the Lazy Man Oxford, I'll put that link right here. Thanks.